Christmas 1918. The First World War is over. Germany lost, and the country is devastated. 2 million German soldiers were killed during the war. There are unrests, famine, poverty, and growing social tensions. In November 1918, the monarchy was overthrown. The German Kaiser Wilhelm II fled the country. Germany is now ruled by a provisional government with the socialists of the SPD and the more leftist USPD under the leadership of Friedrich Ebert. A weak and unstable republic is born. At the end of December 1918, Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg founded the KPD, Kommunistische Partei Deutschlands, the Communist Party of Germany, who have the goals of nationalizing property and establishing a dictatorship of the proletariat as happened in Russia. There are turmoils all over Germany. Many workers are unhappy, and from the east arrive the echoes of the Bolshevik Revolution. The workers have seized the power, lands to the farmers, the hope of a new era. On December 23, the People's Marine Division revolts to demand payment of back wages. Emil Eichhorn, the Berlin's police chief, refuses to use the force against them, and Ebert, the leader of the German government, orders the intervention of the army. There is a battle, and 34 persons are killed. The revolt is put down. After that, Emil Eichhorn is dismissed. He is now considered unreliable. The USPD and KPD decide to hold a demonstration to protest against his dismissal. January 5, the demonstration starts and takes on a scale that exceeded all expectations. Hundreds of thousands of people flow in the streets with red flags. The demonstrators occupy the key points of Berlin. A revolution is starting. On the evening, a revolutionary committee is formed, headed by Liebknecht. Their hope is to right the events and take the power through the revolution, as happened in the Soviet Russia. The first action is to call the workers of Berlin to stage a general strike. On January 7, some 500,000 people pour into the center of Berlin. Soldiers are disarmed. There are first fights in the streets, barricades, the first deaths. And now, in our timeline, the left followed its eternal tradition of divisiveness and ineffectiveness. The Revolutionary Committee did not agree on how to proceed. Some representatives called for armed insurrection. Others pleaded for negotiations with Ebert. Rosa Luxemburg was hesitant and opposed to a revolutionary action, being somewhat anti-Bolshevik. No signal to the hundreds of thousands of demonstrators who were waiting in the streets. So, after 2 days, people returned to their home, and the revolution ended. But what if the KPD leader Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg were less indecisive and unleashed a revolution? January 8, 1919, the Revolutionary Committee has decided the Ebert government has to be overthrown by force of arms. From the Berlin Palace, Liebknecht declares the birth of the German Workers' Republic. The insurgents and troops loyal to the revolution take control of the power stations, bridges, train stations, banks, and telegraph offices, cutting off the communications with military forces loyal to the government outside the city. Ebert flees from Berlin. In such situations, the KPD members could be successful on take to their side some of the regiments stationed in Berlin, but especially the Volksmarine Division, the People's Marine Division. It's an armed unit formed in November with 1,800 men. The Volksmarine Division distributes weapons to the strikers and protects the Spartacist headquarters in Spandau. January 10, Ebert gives the order to crush the revolution. The Revolutionary Committee, Rosa Luxemburg too, calls on the population to prevent the counter-revolution and resist against the traitors in the government who rejected the revolution and allied itself with the capitalists. The mass of the working class follows the call, preparing to the fight. Eichhorn, the former police chief, is reinstalled in his office, ensuring the control of the police. Numerous resolutions from the factories all around Germany called for support the new revolutionary government. January 12, the Freikorps attack. At the dawn, they move into Berlin. The Freikorps units are former soldiers armed with military weapons, machine guns, mortars, and artillery. The fighting lasts for 3 days, but the revolutionary have at their side several army units, determined leaders, and the Freikorps are only 3,000 men. Part of the soldiers, rather than combat against 10,000 men and women in the streets, return to their barracks. 16 January 1919, the Freikorps attack is repelled. Berlin is in the revolutionary hands. The revolution spreads throughout Germany. 10 January, in Bremen, a Soviet republic is established. Johann Knief is the leader. A Soviet republic is established in Bavaria, with Eugen Levin as head of state. The Soviet Republic of Saxony is proclaimed around the cities of Dresden and Leipzig. There are many uprisings in the northwest of Germany. In the Ruhr industrial area, a Red Ruhr army of 80,000 workers is formed. Germany is turning red. The civil war is starting. The two sides in conflict, the Rote Armee, led by the new communist government on one side. On the other side, there are Die Weißen, the Whites with Ebert as leader, with its military and paramilitaries like the Freikorps. The middle and especially the upper classes are on the White side. The atrocities of the Russian Revolution increase the perceptions of to do everything to fight any kind of socialism. The Prussian landowning elite, the Junker class that made up the majority of the German officer army, were barely tolerant of Weimar democracy, and they never even tacitly accept a communist state. The monarchists led by Paul von Hindenburg and the rising National Socialists of Adolf Hitler are vigorous anti-communist, as the great industrialists, knowing very well that they'd be murdered by a communist regime. The Weißen have also the backing from other countries such as the USA, France, UK. There will be the Allied military intervention. The British Royal Marines land at Kiel, while the French army floods into the Ruhr Valley. The French already occupy the Rhineland, a consequence of the Treaty of Versailles. The French army in 1919 is a strong force, but in 1919, the German army is not yet demobilized, thought weakened by the defeat. They still hundreds of thousands of battle-hardened frontline veterans and a consistent weapon production. The Supreme German High Command is against the revolution, but many officers see the invasion as an opportunity to take revenge for the humiliating defeat of a few months earlier. The Rote Armee forms out of the units under the red flag and raise against the foreign invaders. Patriotism unites the Germans. The enemies who have starved us over the past years are invading fatherland. The Allied invasion becomes one of the causes of the success of the German Revolution. The United States have the Third Army commanded by Major General Joseph Dickman in the Koblenz area, but they remain in their barracks. The American public opinion would not understand another bloody war in what is seen as an internal conflict in a far land. The French army easily seizes the Ruhr and Frankfurt, but the contact with the revolution eats away at their morale. The French soldiers are conscripts exhausted of war. A return to the front is the last thing they want. A new war is deeply unpopular in France. There is the risk of a civil war. An attempt to restore the revolutionary Paris Commune as in 1871 is put down by the French army. The French forces in Germany withdraw home as discipline breaks down. Rhineland is occupied by the German Rote Armee. In Britain, there is resistance among the workers to support a reactionary cause, as the invasion of the communist Germany. The British Prime Minister Lloyd George knows that all the continent and probably his country could be at risk in case of communist victory in Germany, an attempt to force the British public into returning to the front lines of battle, with such declarations as, "A bleak and cruel foe has risen. A crass and vicious enemy is threatening our women." Workers disagree and threaten a general strike. Lloyd is forced to back down. There was also huge opposition when the British intervened in the Russian Civil War. They couldn't get involved as much as they wanted to. The Royal Marines withdraw home even before the counterattack of the Volksarmy. The protests in London continue. The Labour Party steps in to save British capitalism by promising to not resume the war. The Labourists will win the 1922 elections. The German Civil War will last years. The Allied continue to supply the Weisen of weapons and ammunition with less and less conviction. They see the communism as a way to definitively weaken Germany. Casualties will be high from the fighting and famines due to the Entente blockade. There will be the suffering of millions of people already proved by the long war. But at the end, the revolutionaries will win, as happened in Russia. Once started, a revolution is difficult to put down. In 1923, 4 years after the Civil War began, the last Freikorps unit, under General von Vader, capitulates near Dortmund. The Civil War is over. Germany has become a Soviet republic. The German Revolution in the world is huge. Russia. In such situation, the Russian Civil War is going to be more successful for the Bolsheviks, with less devastations and shorter. In August 1920, the Crimea is taken, ending the fighting in Russia. After that, there will be only sporadic anti-Bolshevik resistance in Siberia until the collapse of the White Army in January 1923. On November 1918, the Red Army starts moving westwards to conquer as many lands as possible and maybe join up with the German Revolution. The operation is codenamed Target Vistula. On 9 May, the Soviet newspaper Pravda prints an article, "Go West." In the east regions abandoned by the German forces, dozens of factions compete for power: anarchists, communists, the whites, local governments, nationalist movements. In Romania, the Red Army is stopped along the Dniester River, but in Belarus, the Soviets enter Minsk almost unopposed on December 1918. The Soviets are successful in support the Latvian and the Lithuanian Socialist Soviet Republic. Estonia is invaded in 1922. On April 1920, the Polish head of state, Józef Pilsudski, forms an alliance with the Ukrainian nationalist leader, Szymon Petliura, and overrun Ukraine, occupying Kyiv on May 1920. The Soviets counterattack, and on 5 August 1020, the Soviet Western Army, led by the young and competent General Mikhail Tukhachevsky, is at the outskirts of Warsaw. In our timeline, the fall of Warsaw seemed certain, but the Polish forces achieved an unexpected victory in what was defined the miracle of the Vistula. In this timeline, the miracle does not happen. Not possible the transit of Allied war supplies through the communist Germany. In Poland, there are no firearm factories and everything, including ammunition, has to be imported. Part of Poland's military strength must remain on the German border. The Russian morale is boosted by the German Revolution. 25 August 1920, the Red Army enters Warsaw. German troops take Danzig, Poland is in Bolshevik hands. The Bolsheviks' victory in Poland is one of the reasons of the success of the German Revolution. Given the shaky state of the USSR amid the Russian Civil War, there will be almost no aid to the Germans, but the presence of close to 1 million Red Army troops in Poland is enough to suggest French and British not to get involved too much in the German Civil War. The Soviets crossing the German-Polish border to help the Red Brother would be a nightmare. The Russians could utilize whatever resources can be found in Poland, and the captured Polish prisoners are drafted in the ranks after putting into the shock battalions any who shows reactionary symptoms. Hungary. In March 1919, a Soviet republic is proclaimed. Its main figure is Bela Kun. The Hungarian forces invade Slovakia, proclaiming the Slovak Soviet Republic. In our timeline, the Romanians broke through the front and reached Budapest, ending the Hungarian Soviet Republic in April 1920. In this situation, the Romanians would be far more cautious in their advance. The Soviet republics of Hungary and Slovakia survive. They will join in the next years. France. To face the growing socialist movements, France becomes more authoritarian and starts to fortify their border with Germany. The construction of the Maginot Line begins. Pétain rises to power in 1924. The German Revolution will have a domino effect in Italy. Italy is on the brink of a revolution by the end of 1918. The First World War led Italy in economic crisis. There are mass strikes, and on September 1920, 500,000 armed workers in North Italy occupy the factories. PSI, the Italian Socialist Party, supports the revolutionary movement. On 31 October 1922, following a gigantic manifestation in Rome, Togliatti, leader of the Italian Communist Party, is appointed Prime Minister by King Vittorio Emanuele III. Togliatti consolidates power through a series of laws that transforms the nation into one-party socialist dictatorship by 1925. Private property remains. Only part of the industry, banks and lands are nationalized. Socialism is a form of light communism, as fascism in some way is a form of light Nazism. An alliance with Germany and Soviet Union will follow soon. In the United States at the beginning of 1919 starts the so-called Red Scare, a widespread fear of left movements, characterized by exaggerated rhetoric, arrests, anti-immigration movements. The newspapers see the workers' strikes as a foreign import. This is America, not Russia, and describe the consequences of a Bolshevik revolution in the United States. Imposition of atheism, no newspapers, assaults on banks, women nationalized, made the property of the state. Laws punish the display of the red flag. American film industry exploits the fear of Bolshevism. Dangerous Hours tells the story of a Russian infiltration of American industry. The New Moon, the women between the ages of 23 and 32, are property of the Soviet state, and the heroine, Norma Talmadge, is a Russian princess that fended off attempts to nationalize her. The anti-communist hysteria waned in the following years, but remains latent in the American society. The Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, NSDAP, Nazi Party in short words. Since start, they were fiercely against the Bolsheviks and the KPD. A wide part of Radical militants joined the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party has anti-Semitic views, while at least half of the KPD leaders were Jews. So nothing strange that one of the first actions of the new German government is to outlaw the Nazi Party. Drexler and Goebbels are sent in a gulag in Silesia. Göring remains a pilot in a Swedish airline. Hitler, Himmler, and Hess flee abroad in France and Amsterdam, continuing to maintain a Nazi underground organization in Germany and leading the internal resistance to the communist regime. Strasser, one of first leaders of the Nazi Party, was anti-big business, anti-bourgeoisie, and advocated an anti-capitalist social revolutionary course for the Nazi Party. He tried a coexistence with the KPD, but he will be arrested, and a bullet will end his life in a dark basement of a police station in Berlin. After the Lenin's death in 1924, Leon Trotsky wins the power struggle against Stalin due to the increased credibility of world revolution that Trotsky always supported. Stalin remains a general in the Red Army. Trotsky will be less authoritarian and much more genuinely revolutionary leader than Stalin was. And in this situation with Germany, Italy, and Hungary as allied, Russia is less paranoid. After the Civil War, Germany struggles to get back up from its feet, as all Europe, however. There are cities to be rebuilt, civilians to feed from famines, and an entire army to rearm. Liebknecht hold the role of People's Commissar. The Central Committee, based on the Reichstag, now Volkstag, elects the 10 members of the Soviet of People's Representatives, with the role of legislature. Germany refuses the Treaty of Versailles and the payment of the reparations. The Allied could do little apart from the maintenance of the economic blockade on Germany for several years, with almost no results since Germany is surrounded by friendly countries, Russia with their endless raw materials first. The ties between Russia and Germany become closer and closer. In 1926, part of Poland returns to Germany when Poland becomes part of the Soviet Union as Soviet Republic of Poland. The new Germanic regime creates a system for workers' control of factories corresponding to the Bolshevik model. Nationalization of transports and lands of more than 40 hectares. Germany will not have the collectivization of agriculture as occurred in Ukraine and elsewhere. The communism in Germany takes a more social welfare approach. Equal pay, free education when possible, cheap housing, a 5-day workweek in the war industries. The German Labor Front organization provide free sports events, films, concerts, and plays for the workers. Germany had always been a leader in social welfare, with the first health insurance plan for all workers created by Bismarck. All banks in the country are united into a single national bank. Germany is the place where the communism was conceived and where it was supposed to happen. The communism was custom-made for the Germans by Marx. Russia did not fit Marx's prophecy. It was insufficiently developed. A backward semi-feudal country with 80% of its population made of peasants. Marx presumed that the first workers' revolution would happen in an advanced capitalist countries with a large proletariat, either France, Germany, or Britain. Lenin himself considered that Germany was the door through which communism would spread to the rest of Europe and consequently the world. That's why the Bolsheviks were desperately hoping for a successful German revolution. A communist Germany will not have the same strength and industrial power of Nazi Germany. A communist system can't compete with a capitalist economy, but it would have been not so far. This one could be the gross national product in 1929 of several countries. Obviously, Germany would not be the heaven on earth. No freedom of speech, constant surveillance, limited freedom to travel, no freedom of religion. Coffee, fruit, and anything to be purchased from foreigners, very expensive. All other political parties are banned. SPD leaders Hermann Müller, Ebert Wissel, the traitors of the revolution who sided with the Freikorps, are arrested. In 1925, opens the first Gulag in Dachau. Many top industrialists and experts from Heinkel, Messerschmitt, Focke-Wulf, and Krupfli, the country taking as much wealth as they could with them. Foreign corporations like Ford or GM Opel abandoned their factories in Germany. The German government is forced to use all the few foreign exchange reserves, both to import raw materials and to feed its own people. The military production is used as a means to rise the economy. Germany starts rearming secretly and then not so secretly, but the army must be used. The main goal of the Russian and German leaders remains to export the communism worldwide. Engels, Lenin, and Trotsky believe that islands of socialism can't be created in a sea of capitalism. In the long run, their economies will become inefficient and incapable of competing with the rest of the world, and they are doomed to fail. So, the need to spread the revolution. They don't waste time to start. On 15 July 1927, riots start in Vienna after the clashes between paramilitary forces, the Nationalist Front Kämpfer and the Communist Republikanischer Schutzbund, and the police kills 90 protesters. Following these events, the Austrian Communist Party KPO makes a coup d'etat, while the German Rote Armee crosses the border into Austria. A communist government is formed, with Ruth Fischer head of the council. She was in Berlin since September 1919, at the start of the revolutionary ferments. The councils of the workers and soldiers vote for the unification with Germany. In Spain, the dictator Miguel Primo de Rivera seizes the power in September 1923. The PCE, Communist Party of Spain, organizes an insurrection with few results. The arrival of German and Italian volunteers changes the situation. A civil war starts, and in 1929, a socialist republic is formed on the Italian model. Mixed economy, a moderate agrarian reform, anti-religion, autonomy to Catalonia, and so on. Portugal follows the same path, ending the political instability started after the end of monarchy in 1910. The attempts to spread the revolution in the European colonial empires fail. The highly traditional bourgeoisie and the large colonial landlords of the colonial nations are ideologically hostile to Marxism, whilst the indigenous lower classes are too weak to seize power. In India, there are trials against the communist movement for supposed conspiracy in Peshawar and Kanpur, but there are no insurrections or revolts. In China, the Chinese Communist Party becomes a KMT allied. In our timeline, Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the KMT, fearing that the Chinese Communist Party was trying to destroy the KMT from inside, he was right, proceeded to arrest and execute the communists, marking the beginning of the Civil War. In this timeline, with a wider financial and military support received by a Trotskyist Soviet Union and a communist Germany, the CCP would be not so easy to purge. In 1927, the leader of the left wing of the KMT, Wang Jingwei, arrests Chiang Kai-shek. The Civil War ends soon. China is communist. After the financial crash of 1929 and the Great Depression that follows, the German and Russian economy continue to grow steadily, fueled by intensive investments in heavy industry. Germany and Russia have less international trade, so the effects of the Great Depression are less. To many people, it looks like the fulfillment of Marx's prophecy: capitalism is destroying itself. At this point, with the red tide advancing in the world, England and France probably will get a little nervous. The strength of the Volkswehr continues to rise. The regular German army has around 100 divisions, with more than 50,000 men enlisted in the Rote Front Kämpferbund, the elite of the army. Ernst Johannes Fritz Thalmann is the leader of RFB. After World War I, 3 million ethnic Germans live in Czechoslovakia. The nationalism, the race, is a concept present in the German communism. Marx saw Germans as the master workers of a communist world, the communist elected people. 1929. Liebknecht demands the annexation of Sudetenland under threat of war. The British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald and the French President Pétain advise Beneš, the Czech leader, to concede to the German demands. They are not ready for a war. But without the Sudeten, where almost all the defensive fortifications were, Czechoslovakia is weakened. 7 December 1929. The Communist Party of Czechoslovakia holds demonstrations in Ostrava. There are clashes with the police, then the Czech army restores the order. But the violence continues in the whole country. On the morning of 15 February 1930, German troops entered Czechoslovakia, meeting practically no resistance. A Soviet Republic of Bohemia and Moravia is created and unanimously asks the incorporation into the German Soviet Socialist Republic. On 18 February, the Slovak Soviet Republic is proclaimed, and the next days, Russia occupies the Carpathian Ruthenia. Czechoslovakia ceases to exist. Germany is now a giant in the center of Europe, a threat to the English supremacy and British Lebensraum that covers 25% of global landmass and all the 7 seas. Germany has to be stopped. 1 March 1930, France and the United Kingdom send an ultimatum for German forces immediately to withdraw from Czechoslovakia. The ultimatum is not answered. 3 March 1930, France and British Empire declare war on Germany. The same day Soviet Union enters the war at the side of their red brother. Italy and Hungary follow soon. Japan stands as a British ally and enters the war, starting the invasion of China and declaring war on USSR. 1930, the Second World War is begun, an ideological war between capitalism and communism.